What happens when Hollywood's most unpredictable actor meets a talk show host who thinks he can control the narrative? You're about to witness one of the most explosive confrontations ever caught on late-night television. And trust me, you won't believe how this unfolds. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about celebrity interviews. The Late Show studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy when Nicolas Cage walked onto the set. The audience erupted in applause, clearly excited to see the legendary actor who had captivated audiences for decades with his intense performances and larger-than-life personality. Stephen Colbert, sitting behind his desk with that signature smirk, seemed ready to put on his usual show of comedic superiority. "Nicolas Cage, everybody!" Colbert announced with theatrical enthusiasm, his voice carrying that familiar tone of barely concealed condescension that his regular viewers had grown accustomed to. The man, the myth, the legend, and quite possibly the most memed actor of our generation. Cage settled into the guest chair, his eyes already showing a hint of wariness. He had been doing interviews for over 3 decades, and he could sense when a host was more interested in getting laughs at his expense than having a genuine conversation. "Well, Stephen," Cage began, his voice measured but carrying an undercurrent of intensity, "I appreciate being here, though I have to say, being called the most memed actor feels a bit reductive, don't you think?" Colbert leaned back in his chair, clearly not expecting pushback so early in the interview. "Oh, come on, Nicholas. You have to admit, the internet has had a field day with your, shall we say, passionate acting style. I mean, we've all seen the clips, the GIFs, the remixes. Passionate acting style," Cage repeated slowly, his famous intensity beginning to simmer just beneath the surface. "Is that what we're calling it now? Because I prefer to think of it as commitment to my craft, something that seems to be increasingly rare in this business." The audience shifted uncomfortably as they sensed the tension building. This wasn't the light-hearted banter they were expecting from a typical late-night interview. Colbert, seemingly oblivious to the growing hostility, pressed on with his prepared material. "But you have to admit, some of your movie choices have been, well, interesting. I mean, we're talking about a guy who once owned a pyramid tomb, collected shrunken heads, and bought a stolen dinosaur skull. That's not exactly normal Hollywood behavior." Cage's jaw tightened visibly. "Stephen, let me ask you something. Do you research your guests before they come on? Or do you just read whatever your writers put on those cards?" "Of course I research my guests," Colbert replied, his tone becoming slightly defensive. "That's why I know about your, shall we say, eccentric spending habits and your recent string of, well, let's call them direct-to-video adventures." The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Cage leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locking onto Colbert's with an intensity that made the host visibly uncomfortable. "Direct-to-video adventures," Cage said, his voice growing louder. "You mean the films where I actually get to work with passionate filmmakers who care about storytelling rather than just trying to manufacture moments for social media clips?" Colbert tried to regain control of the conversation with a nervous laugh. "Hey, I'm just having some fun here, Nicholas. That's what we do on late-night television. We have fun with our guests." "Fun," Cage repeated, standing up from his chair. The audience gasped as the Oscar winner towered over the desk, his full presence commanding the studio. "You call this fun? Bringing someone onto your show just to mock their life choices and reduce their entire career to internet memes? This isn't fun, Stephen. This is lazy, disrespectful television." Colbert's face flushed red as he realized he was losing control of the situation. His writers hadn't prepared him for this level of pushback. "Look, Nicholas, maybe you should sit back down. We're live here, and I think you're taking this a bit too seriously." "Too seriously?" Cage's voice rose to near shouting levels. "My career, my craft, my life's work, and I'm taking it too seriously? Stephen, do you have any idea what it's like to pour your soul into your work, only to have people like you turn it into a punchline? The host tried to salvage the interview by moving to commercial break, but Cage wasn't finished. No, we're not going to commercial. I want to address this right now, in front of your audience, because they deserve to hear the truth about what happens when you invite someone onto your show just to humiliate them. Colbert's smugness was rapidly dissolving into panic as he realized this was spiraling completely out of his control. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they should laugh, applaud, or call for security. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what was becoming television history. "Nicholas, please," Colbert stammered, "let's just take a breath here and reset. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot." Cage laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The wrong foot? Stephen, you invited me here tonight with the intention of making me look foolish, didn't you? This whole thing was set up to get your precious, viral moments at my expense." The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. This was no longer an interview gone wrong. This was a full-scale collision between two very different philosophies about entertainment and respect. "You want to know what this is really about?" Cage continued, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the studio. "This is about a host who's built his entire career on punching down, on making himself look clever at other people's expense, and tonight you picked the wrong target." Colbert's face was now bright red, and his usual composure had completely evaporated. "Nicholas, you need to calm down right now. This is my show, and I won't be spoken to like this in front of my audience." "Your show?" Cage laughed again, this time with genuine incredulity. "Stephen, this stopped being your show the moment you decided to ambush a guest with prepared insults disguised as interview questions. You want to talk about my career choices? Let's talk about yours." The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep filming or look away. Cage began pacing behind the guest chair, his energy filling the entire studio. "You built your reputation playing a character on someone else's show, a satirical pundit who was supposed to be obviously ridiculous. But somewhere along the way, you started believing your own act, didn't you?" "That's enough," Colbert snapped, his voice shaking with anger. "Security, I think we need to escort Mr. Cage off the premises." "Oh no," Cage said, turning to face the host directly. "You don't get to call security just because your little ambush interview backfired. You want to know what the real joke is? Here, you spend every night mocking people, politicians, celebrities, anyone who makes an easy target, but you can't handle 2 minutes of someone actually challenging you." Colbert stood up behind his desk, trying to reassert his authority. "This is completely unprofessional behavior. I'm trying to run a professional show here." "Professional?" Cage's voice boomed across the studio. "Stephen, there's nothing professional about inviting someone onto your show under false pretenses just so you can humiliate them for cheap laughs. That's not comedy. That's cruelty." The host's mask was completely off now, revealing the petty, vindictive person underneath the carefully crafted public persona. "You know what, Nicholas? Maybe the internet has you figured out after all. Maybe you are just an overpaid, washed-up actor who takes himself way too seriously." The studio gasped. Even Colbert's own production team looked shocked at their host's vicious personal attack. This had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Cage stopped pacing and fixed Colbert with a stare that could have melted steel. "There it is. There's the real Stephen Colbert, everybody. Not the witty, satirical host you see on television, but a small, bitter man who gets his kicks from tearing other people down." "I'm calling security right now," Colbert said, reaching for his desk phone. "This interview is over." "You're calling security because you can't handle an honest conversation?" Cage asked, his voice now deadly calm. "Because someone finally called you out on your behavior? Stephen, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've worked with directors who screamed at me, producers who tried to destroy my career, critics who savaged my work. But I've never encountered someone quite as cowardly as you." Colbert slammed the phone down. "Cowardly? I'm not the one having a meltdown on live television." "This isn't a meltdown, Stephen. This is what happens when someone finally stands up to a bully." Cage's voice carried across the studio with perfect clarity. "You've spent years hiding behind your desk, lobbing insults at people who aren't there to defend themselves. But tonight, your target is sitting right here, and I'm not going to smile and laugh while you try to destroy my reputation for your entertainment." The tension in the studio was so thick, it was almost suffocating. The audience sat frozen, witnessing what felt like a genuine psychological breakdown, not of the guest, but of the host who was clearly losing control of everything he thought he could manipulate. "You want to talk about my movie choices?" Cage continued, his intensity building again. "Fine, let's talk about them. Every single film I've made, even the ones that didn't work out, I approached with complete commitment. I gave everything I had to those roles because that's what real artists do. We don't phone it in. We don't hide behind clever quips and prepared jokes. We put ourselves on the line." Colbert was now visibly shaking. Whether from anger or panic, it was impossible to tell. "This is insane. You're completely out of line." "Here." "Out of line?" Cage moved closer to the desk, his presence dominating the entire space. "Stephen, the only thing out of line here is your complete lack of respect for your guests and your audience. You think they tune in to watch you humiliate people. They deserve better than this manufactured controversy you call entertainment." Security guards finally appeared at the edge of the stage, but they seemed hesitant to intervene in what was clearly a battle of words rather than physical violence. "Don't you dare lecture me about my audience," Colbert spat. "They love this show because I'm not afraid to ask the tough questions." "Tough questions?" Cage's voice rose again. "Stephen, asking someone about internet memes and making jokes about their personal life isn't journalism, it's gossip. There's nothing tough about kicking someone when they're down or making cheap jokes about their struggles." The confrontation had reached a crescendo, and everyone in the studio could sense that something irreversible was about to happen. The security guards stood uncertainly at the edge of the stage, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding before them. This wasn't a typical removal of an unruly guest. This was a complete dismantling of everything the show represented, and they knew it. Cage turned to address the audience directly, ignoring Colbert completely. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand what you've witnessed here tonight. You've seen what happens when someone refuses to play along with a game that's rigged from the start." "Don't address my audience," Colbert shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Security, get him out of here now." But the audience was listening to Cage, hanging on every word. They had come expecting lightweight entertainment, and instead were witnessing something raw and genuine that felt more real than anything they had seen on television in years. "Your audience?" Cage turned back to face the host, his voice dripping with disdain. "Stephen, these people aren't your property. They're human beings who deserve honest entertainment, not this manufactured cynicism you're peddling every night." One of the security guards finally approached, speaking quietly. "Mr. Cage, we're going to need you to come with us." Cage nodded calmly. "Of course, I'll leave willingly. But first, I want to say something to Stephen that I think needs to be said." Colbert was breathing heavily, his carefully constructed television persona in complete ruins. "I don't want to hear anything else from you." "Too bad," Cage replied, his voice now eerily calm. "Stephen, you want to know what the real tragedy is here? You actually had talent once. Your old character, the satirical pundit, that required skill, timing, intelligence. But this version of you, this bitter, small-minded bully hiding behind a desk, this is just sad." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Even the camera operators had stopped moving, transfixed by what they were capturing. You've turned into everything your old character was supposed to be mocking, Cage continued. A smug, self-important media figure who thinks cruelty is clever and meanness is entertainment. The irony would be funny if it weren't so pathetic. Colbert's face was now a mask of pure rage. Get out! Get out of my studio right now! Gladly, Cage said, straightening his jacket. But before I go, let me leave your audience with something to think about. Every night, this man sits behind that desk and tells you what to think, who to laugh at, who to despise. But tonight, you've seen who he really is when someone doesn't play by his rules. The security guard gently touched Cage's arm, but the actor wasn't finished. Stephen, you've built your career on the premise that you're smarter than everyone else, that you're the voice of reason in a crazy world. But the truth is, you're just another entertainment industry parasite who feeds off other people's misfortune. The only difference between you and a tabloid journalist is that you have better writers. That's it, Colbert screamed, his voice breaking completely. Get him out of here. Cut the cameras. Go to commercial. End this. But the cameras kept rolling, and Cage's final words rang out across the studio with perfect clarity. You know what, Stephen? I actually feel sorry for you. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that the point of entertainment is to elevate people, not tear them down. You chose to become a destroyer instead of a creator, and that's a choice you'll have to live with. As the security guards finally began to escort Cage toward the exit, the audience began to applaud. Not the polite, orchestrated applause of a television show, but genuine, spontaneous clapping that grew louder and more sustained with each step. Colbert stood behind his desk, watching his carefully controlled world collapse around him. "Stop clapping," he demanded. "This isn't applause-worthy behavior." But the audience ignored him completely, rising to their feet as Cage reached the exit. The actor turned back one final time, not to look at Colbert, but to acknowledge the people who were showing him respect. "Thank you," he said simply, and then he was gone. The studio fell into chaos as producers rushed onto the stage, trying to salvage what was left of the show. Colbert stood frozen behind his desk, the reality of what had just happened slowly sinking in. He had invited Nicolas Cage onto his show expecting an easy target, someone he could mock and dismiss for cheap laughs. Instead, he had encountered someone who refused to be diminished, someone who fought back with intelligence and dignity. The audience continued to buzz with excitement long after Cage had left. They had witnessed something unprecedented, a moment when the mask slipped completely off one of television's most protected figures. They had seen a genuine artist stand up for his craft and his dignity against someone who had tried to reduce him to a punchline. As the credits rolled on what would become one of the most talked-about television moments in recent memory, one thing was clear. Nicolas Cage had not been defeated or humiliated. Instead, he had exposed the emptiness at the heart of modern celebrity culture, the cruel machinery that chews up real artists and spits out content for social media consumption. The man who walked off that stage with his head held high had reminded everyone watching what genuine dignity looked like in an age of manufactured outrage and scripted controversy. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Drop a comment below and let me know if you believe Stephen Colbert crossed the line, or if Nicolas Cage overreacted to what was supposed to be harmless entertainment. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that reveal the truth behind the glamorous facade of Hollywood.